What's going on, guys, and welcome to today's video. And it's been quite a while, but we are getting ready to start a new race series here. And obviously, as you can see, we've got a Jato 4x4 BL-2s. Now, yes, as you can tell, we are going to be running the new Spec Jato series here. Now, this is a new class, new series, new whatever you want to call it, of a spec racing class that Shaw's and MSN have kind of come up with and kind of put together down ground rules on what you're able to do and not do to try to have this be a extremely competitive and affordable in the world of, racing classes. So we're gonna today go over unboxing this thing. No, we're not gonna get too in depth in unboxing because there has been a million unboxing videos of Jato and Jato VXLs on YouTube. So this is nothing new, but hopefully this is gonna kind of be a video talking about what you're needing to buy or what kind of route you're going to want to take if you are interested in getting into Spec Jato racing here. So what you're able to do now, again, this is as of right now, with Shaw's and again MSN allowing these certain things. So step one, or the first allowable thing, is going to be a servo. The factory servo on a lot of TRAXXAS models is weak or prone to failure or slow or whatever bad word you want to say. So we're going to be throwing in the high torque 400 ounce TRAXXAS servo into this thing. Now, yes, we're replacing a TRAXXAS servo with a TRAXXAS servo, but one of the two, I can't remember if it was MSN or Shaw's, was requiring a TRAXXAS servo, and the other one allowed any servo. So I'm just playing it safe just in case this thing ever goes on the road to one of those series. We will again just be running in our local Emory Park summer series here in the Wichita, Kansas area. So that's again what we are putting this together for, but we are making it compliant with those two bigger race groups there. So again, starting with a quicker, higher torque steering servo. This is all metal geared, so we aren't going to have TRAXXAS plastic servo gear issues, but that's going to kind of be the big thing to make the car work and handle a lot quicker, more responsive when you are diving into corners. Now, the other kind of unfortunate thing that guys have already found out with these Jatos, and I guess the Jato VXL, is the shock shafts. If you get into trouble with them, the shock shafts end up bending like bananas. That's obviously going to ruin your race if you've got a shock that's bound up, fully collapsed, or extended and it won't work. I've been in a race and had a shock come apart, and not due to a bent shock shaft, but it absolutely ruins the event. So we've got the TRAXXAS titanium coated correct shock shafts again for the Jato and or Jato VXL. I am 92% sure it is the same shafts front and rear. I've got two of the same part numbers here for our shock shafts. So that is going to be kind of a preventative maintenance mod. It's not really going to make the car work any better, but it's hopefully going to make the car last better deeper into the season without bent shock shafts. Now, the other allowable change is gearing. Again, gearing that's allowable through TRAXXAS, if that makes sense. This thing comes with a 12-tooth pinion on the BL-2s version. I'm going to go out on a limb and change gearing before even the first event, before the thing's even out of the box. I'm going to jump up to a 13-tooth pinion. Again, maybe don't do this right off the bat, but with what MSN Racing and is said in a few of his videos, that the thing's, it's pretty slow. So we are going to rely or hope that we've got enough power, got enough torque that we're going to be able to add one more tooth on our pinion, basically getting us a little bit more top speed, but what we gain in top speed, we're going to be losing in initial punch off the line, initial, hit out of the corner. So pending this poor little underpowered brushless system is powerful enough to handle one more tooth on that pinion, I think will be a little bit of a competitive advantage. Again, on those straightaways, when you're wide open throttle, if this thing has one more tooth, we're able to pick up and carry a little bit more speed. Now, first race comes along, maybe I will immediately be ripping that 13 tooth out and going back to the 12 tooth. I'm obviously going to have that with me, but I'm going to just go out on a limb and attempt that 13 tooth, and maybe it won't even make that much of a difference. Now, the other allowable change is shock oil. You can run any shock oil your heart desires. Do I know suspension tuning that well? No, absolutely not. That's why we are going to be running the factory weight shock oil when we rebuild those shocks for these shock shafts. And don't quote me, I'll probably throw it up on the screen. The factory front, I think, is 40 and the rear is 50, or vice versa. So I just grabbed, again, some 40 weight and some 50 weight so we can put this back to OEM factory shock oil when we rebuild those shocks for the shock shafts. Again, the other allowable thing is gear or diff oil. If you're tearing those diffs apart, the BL-2s version does not have a center differential, but you do have front and rear differentials if you want to get fancy, if you know what you're doing and you want to add, remove, again, whatever your fine tuning is going to be, we're going to leave that thing box stock because, again, I'm not that good of a driver, and we are just going to hope to keep the thing on the track and moving. Now, the last kind of gray area, I guess, if you will, most of the series are allowing optional plastic colors. Now, again, the optional plastics, whether that be body plastics or, of course, TRAXXAS makes all of the different colored control arms and suspension leaks and all of that. So, optional plastic parts or optional colored parts, again, that's where we've got some optional colored parts here. These are actually the aluminum hubs. Now, again, depending on your series, absolutely check and make sure your group is allowing this. But unfortunately, the BL-2s comes with plastic threaded hubs with aluminum nuts. So on a racetrack or in the pits, you're often pulling wheels and tires off, checking, changing, whatever. The plastic threads are absolutely going to fail on these things just with a few uses, needing to get those wheels and tires tight. So our group is at least announced that we are allowing the aluminum hubs. So these are, again, just an optional part that is the aluminum hubs that basically come on the VXL version. They sell them in a whole bunch of different colors. I just went with the gray black color so it just looks normal, and it will hopefully make this thing last and work a little bit better. Again, another thing, depending on your race organization, you're going to need a transponder here. We've got a 2-wire transponder that's going to work with our local timing system. And again, check with your group on what you are allowed to run for timing. Now, the battery of choice, again, make sure you need or don't need a TRAXXAS branded battery with your local group. But the 2-cell 5800 is the, I guess, small enough or smallest battery that you can run, because you're also got to be thinking about weight, but again, large enough that you're able to make it through qualifying, the mains, all of that on a single charge, I guess, if you will. Any larger, you're just throwing more weight in the car. Any smaller of a capacity battery, and you are not going to be able to make it through the sessions there. Now, last but not least, absolutely not required, is again, clear body. I'm wanting to run a white color, like most of my vehicles. So I've grabbed the optional white wing. Now, you got to be careful. There's 2 different wings. There's a race wing or the standard wing rear spoiler. This is the standard one, which is the same that's on the vehicle, but white. And then, like I said, we do have the optional clear body. We'll probably do a separate video on that body, just on basic Lexan body prep, cleaning, and then throwing some paint on that thing. But again, that will be a really basic white paint job with a white spoiler, because that makes it pop. It makes it easy to see out on course in a sea of other like vehicles. So again, that will probably be a separate video with the paint. So let's get this thing unboxed, and let's at least get some of this stuff bolted on. We'll probably do a separate video on shock building, just so we can kind of not have this thing be 40 minutes long, as it probably already will be. So today we will at least be probably throwing on our servo here, getting that centered up on new servo installation, throwing our hubs on, because that will be a nice, quick and easy thing. Probably getting our wiring ran for our transponder, and then last but not least, we will throw our 13-tooth pinion on this thing to hopefully get a teeny bit more speed moving down the track. Now guys, like I said, you guys have probably seen a million unboxings, so we aren't going to get too crazy here. We're just going to get this thing out. Now this one is the black colorway. This is what the local hobby shop here had. They had gotten a couple of them in. And honestly, the black is pretty darn cool. We'll get our body clips here out of the way. Okay, so we are going to start with getting all of our wheels and tires off this thing out of the way, just so we've got a little bit more room to work. And we'll get these plastic hubs off this thing, because they are absolutely going to cause us issue down the road. Okay guys, so throwing our hubs on here first, we are going to need to break loose the center retainer here on those. Now, if you've got a 17mm wrench, you could absolutely hold the hub here, break those loose, or if you don't have one, easy, you can just throw your wheel back on, hold the wheel by hand, and then get that center retaining bolt nut broken loose. Get your wheel off there, and then again, you can take that center the rest of the way out. Now we'll be cautious sliding our hub off so we can make sure we retain the pin here. But now, once that's off, the new hub kit does come with another set of 4 pins, but they are very identical to the pins that are in the vehicle. So as long as yours are there, you're able to take your new aluminum hub and slide it over, again, making sure that center pin is back in the recessed area. And then the kit even comes with a correct sized Allen wrench for the much larger, nicer aluminum hub retaining nuts here for the end. And again, you can do it very similarly. Get it tight, throw your wheel on, and kind of make that final, snug tightening. Now again, make sure you haven't over tightened this, but as long as we've got movement there and everything is free, we should be good. So again, we need to repeat this 4 more times for the rest of the vehicle, and we will have our nice aluminum hubs on this thing. All right, guys, so we are going to tackle the steering servo next. We've got a couple of Allens here that are going to hold kind of the front lower suspension section onto the chassis. We're going to get those buzzed out and get this front kind of peeled off. Okay, guys, with those 4 screws out, we're able to pull that front section off. Now we'll also get the steering linkage pulled off the servo arm, just so we can, again, get the rest of this front end pulled off. Now, unfortunately, the center drive shaft is pinned or bolted onto that front axle or diff. So that's going to come out with that full front assembly. But again, with 4 screws out and then a 5th for the steering servo arm linkage attachment bolt, I guess, you can have the whole front end off and set out of the way. And again, guys, here you can see we are now left with just the servo attachment points here. And we are going to have our wiring for that servo up into our receiver box. Now, guys, one thing we are going to quickly do before we pull the old servo out is get the servo centered, just so we can know right where the servo arm is pointed, whether that be straight up or where, again, that center point is. So we're going to power the transmitter on. We are going to plug our battery in and hit our power button here on the ESC. We're going to center up our steering trim on the remote, dead center, no left or right trim. We are then going to look at the front of the vehicle and see kind of right exactly where that servo arm is pointed, whether, again, that is straight up and down, that's offset one way or the other. And as we can see, we do have just a teeny bit of offset there to one side. So we'll know when we go back together with the new servo, once we center the new servo, that that arm needs to be pointed there for kind of a very center point. So we'll get our servo unplugged. We will get our receiver box pulled apart, which again consists of the top wiring cover, where that wiring is going to duck out of the receiver box. And then finally we can pull the receiver box itself apart. And guys, now with that up, we can see where the servo wiring is coming into the box, so we can unplug that. Now with that servo unplugged, we can finish up here by pulling the servo mounting screws out of the front. And then finally be able to slide this thing out of the chassis, and now we are left with that. So with our new high torque 400 ounce servo, now this is a little bit quicker again than that, so that is going to be beneficial, and just the fact that the thing has a little bit more torque than the stock servo will help with steering, help with getting the thing moved around the track. Now we are going to want to center the servo before we swap over that servo horn. And all that consists of is just plugging the new servo in, firing everything back up so we can, again, make sure that new servo is centered. So again, transmitter on. We'll get our battery plugged in. Turn on that ESC. And again, make sure that servo is centered. Our trim is centered, and then again, we can swap over the servo horn. Now, installation is obviously the same as removal. We'll be able to get our servo screws thrown back in the front, get that front piece bolted back on with those 4 screws, get our wiring kind of tidied up, and then we will have our nice heavy-duty, high-torque steering servo, so we have one less thing to go poorly. Now guys, as you can see, we've got a lot more wiring we're going to need to get stuffed into the receiver box. But before we get the receiver box all bolted back down, we are going to want to install our transponder. Again, this might be different depending on your race series or your local track, but they are all going to be very similar here. Now, installation, I am always looking to get this thing mounted as far forward on the chassis as possible. And like I said, now with that mounted, we can run our wiring into the receiver box, get all of that mess wadded back up in there, and then be able to move on. Okay, so like I said, guys, we are going to throw a 13 tooth pinion in this thing as opposed to the factory 12 tooth pinion in hopes we can gain just a little bit more top speed on straightaways. This surface is a pretty hard packed surface, so I think this will be a beneficial change. Now to access gearing, we'll just pull the rear kind of gear cover off here. We've got 2 screws up here, and then I'm going to go ahead and pull the front screw of that center brace so we can get that whole thing up and out of the way. Okay, so with that top motor screw out, you can pull the motor screw out and the little plastic spacer guide piece. This is kind of the piece that presets motor gear spacing. We're going to need to get rid of that when we go with this aftermarket or different gearing. Now with that top motor screw out, this thing, the motor and plate will just lift up out of the chassis. The bottom screw is just on a pivot. There's not actually a hole holding that thing in. So now obviously we're just going to be removing the 12 tooth pinion here, throwing the 13 tooth pinion on, and getting our gear mesh set. And what we're going to be using there is just the old piece of paper trick. Basically, you're going to take a piece of normal white paper, smash it between the spur gear and the pinion gear, tighten the motor up, and then pull your paper out. And in theory, that should get you a pretty perfect gear mesh. Okay, so with our paper here, again, double check. You're going to want a teeny bit of backlash there in the gears. If your paper's ridiculously thin, this one is on the thinner side, so I did end up sliding the motor over still a little bit more. But you guys probably can't hear that on camera, but we have just an ever so slight amount of play or backlash between the pinion gear and the spur gear there. And that's what we're going for. We do not want those gears fully, fully in contact. We want just a teeny bit of play. So now, like I said, we've got that 13 tooth pinion. We will obviously be bringing that 12 tooth along just to see if that is not the right move. Now guys, one little trick here to hopefully not ruin your weekend is these darn TRAXXAS screw-in hinge pins. These are the outer hinge pins. The inner hinge pins on the Jato are captured where they've got a plate on the front and the back and they can't fall out. The outer hinge pins are your more traditional threaded in screw in type hinge pins. And these things, if you haven't been, if you haven't been around these style of hinge pins, those things love to back out, like to walk out. Buddy of mine that has had a Jato, Spec Jato, getting ready. He's ran it out on track a few times practicing and said, man, the hinge pins are already backing out of the darn thing. So here is a pretty much cost-free, little tip, again, to hopefully prevent that. So all we're going to be doing is backing these hinge pins out till we can see the threads. And again, the threads are right here on the head side of that screw. So we're going to back these things out. And all we're going to do is take a little dab of super glue, CA glue, tire glue, just a little dab, and then thread that back in. Again, all we're trying to do is basically put a little bit of hold on that hinge pin into the knuckle there so it doesn't back its way out. Because if you're midway through a race and lose a hinge pin or it's bound up in the wheel and tire, it's not going to be good. So again, we've got just a little dab of clear super glue. Pushed into those threads. And again, we'll just run this right back in. And just like that, we've hopefully now got a hinge pin that is way less likely to back itself out on track when you absolutely don't want it to back itself out. So we just need to do this 4 more times on those outer lower hinge pins, and then we will be a little bit more prepped. All right, guys, so I think that is going to do it for the first Jato, Spec Jato racing prep video here on the channel. We still got quite a bit of work to do on this thing. We need to do front and rear shocks for the new titanium coated shock shafts. Again, that is the slightly firmer shock shaft option from TRAXXAS, because apparently these things like to bend shock shafts. So that is kind of a required, necessary upgrade if you don't, again, want to have a bad day out on the track. But we got a decent amount knocked out here. We got the new high torque steering servo. We've got those aluminum hubs. Again, make sure those are allowable in your race group. We went ahead and got our transponder installed, wired up into the factory receiver box. We swapped out our 12-tooth pinion for a 13-tooth pinion in hopes that is the magic ticket to get a little bit more speed out on track. We've got our gear mesh set up. And yeah, like I said, guys, we've got some shocks to build and we've got a body to paint. Again, absolutely not required, but if you want to have a little better visual on the car out on track, a different color body than everybody else running is always beneficial. So guys, like I said, I think that's going to do it for this episode until we get this thing back out and hopefully racing. I'm pretty excited to see how the thing does on track. Again, I haven't even got to drive it yet. It's just came out of the box, as you guys saw, but it was very nice working on something that has never seen dirt before. So guys, thanks for sitting here through this probably terribly long video here on doing some track prep for Spec Jato. And guys, until the next video, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.